I wanted to have some Maria coffee time with my lovely IHP community and share with you an amazing and interesting video for my lovely polyamory community. It's on Boldly Grow YouTube, and this is where Jay actually helps people to boldly grow themselves and their relationships and their creativity. I've watched a couple of the videos, really great information. I'll try and tag the YouTube channel and then also the video to this myth busting for polyamory that we're going to talk a little bit about from a 5D mystic perspective. For my lovely mystics, you have a connection with your oversoul, and we talk about that in the paid subscription model, Lightworker's Life, and the oversoul, so twin flames, soulmates. And here's where, with the aspect of clairs, seeing past or future lives, although we know time doesn't exist, but still when we have these experiences, they're specific. And so here's where, for a person who is in the realm of 5D, it's secure attachment person, restorative embodied self, integrated mind, 5-dimension, a state of consciousness that involves a person who can be equanimous and unconditionally loving is the word I use, but it really is a person who can be compassionate. In fact, we involve rational compassion. There's not an illogical anything. It's that we usually don't have debates with people who are predominantly trying to tell us who to be, and they're predominantly only using their left modality brain, and their right is completely offline or not engaged. And if it does get engaged, we start to meet potentially their rigid form because of their cognitive dissonance or confirmation bias or something that's personal in theirs. So the reality is, usually we don't talk about a lot of things. I don't use identifiers personally, nor does any person who is a differentiated self in the Enlightenment soul age group, but we do use words. And polyamory represents the type of person I am, because since I was young, I unconditionally love. And I have intimacy because of sharing my soul, not the body. So here, let's bust the first myth, which is anyone who is polyamorous for reasons that are not, I don't know who I am, and we don't become it, by the way. We usually are it. There are those who contemplate it, and they contemplate it, and they do growth, and this is where I'm not going to talk about that one. I'm sharing a personal experience, the perspective of one individual, 5DC, for my community. You know this, in the Enlightenment soul age group. So one person out of 8 billion, and I don't know what the small portion of polyamory is. So I love what Jay shares because it's all accurate in a way of dispelling what, instead, when I heard this one comedian basically call people who are polyamorous, women particularly, in this case I identify as a woman with a she, and when I heard that, I was like, I'll make sure to get used to potentially being named things that, honestly, it's 2023. I don't find language offensive. I'm also grown up, so I learned how to be okay with who I am, and that people will have different opinions, and that's why if a person uses a curse word, this doesn't mean anything to me, since the person who's using the curse word obviously has a lack of vocabulary, or they're in their biological rudeness, which is where, again, we don't try to engage in conversations with those who we begin to feel they get rigid. Their mind is rigid, which means they're going to either move to chaos, or they're already letting us in on their cognitive dissonance, their confirmation bias, their opinion about the world, which we're happy to hear, and that way we get to be the sounding board. We're not going to say, oh, let me argue with you about who I am and let you in on insulting or doing whatever else it is that you want to do. So polyamory, it's not about sex, because intimacy is not about body and body. This whole idea, by the way, I have always not understood, like, my soul is a lot more vulnerable in my heart than my body. The body is the body. It really isn't as big of a deal when it comes to it. It will die, as we all know, when the time comes. So if there's one thing that is actually really important in relationships for a person who is polyamorous, it's the depth of you, which is why sex, it has nothing to do with it. In fact, we don't always want to share anything of that sort with people, particularly for many reasons we won't get into right now. But polyamory as Jay points out, is not about people who can't commit. I can confirm that. In fact, if there's anything that I've seen throughout the years of my life, is the inability for the monogamous people to commit. Honestly, it's something to this day. I can't believe, again, the insults that people will use with each other when it's 2023 versus using their head and thinking about what is a relationship, what is commitment. Authenticity, yes. To be there, you must be a secure attachment person, or at the very least be aware of your adaptive child. When that charge state begins to make its way to your mouth, I know when I'm having my adaptive child come up, it's usually with my mother, my twin sister, my younger sister, my friends not so much. And if it ever does come into the mix with those lovely intimate relationships, I actually am usually picking people who can handle their mental and emotional stuff, because otherwise, yeah, they won't be able to grow up together. It has nothing to do with bodily connection. It actually has everything to do with how much of my emotions can I share with you. If we're growing intimate, then that means a lot, because vulnerability is a part of any relationship that is intimate. Doesn't have to be romantic, by the way. And here's where, for me, I found that there's mixed information on that. There are polyamory people that consider themselves polyamory for intimacy and some for romance, and for like me, it's both really, because just unconsciously loving all of, I don't have, there's no like gauge here. There's just love, 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 love. And then there's growing our strong bonds with the people that want to stick around. But romance, at the end of the video, when Jay points out, if you're going to hold romantic relationships, definitely the way that it is presented, I would agree, 2 or 3. The reality is something that's romantic, something that's involving commitment in a long-term lifestyle is not going to be like 10 people. This is where it's a number that it's just not feasible mathematically, not to mention doesn't seem to take place because, well, years are very short if we think about it. The long time that we have here is not that long. I'm 43. Hopefully I got more than 100, but if not, I don't have that many years. So back to these myths that Jay dispels. The one about chaotic free for all. Oh, I love that one. That one is like, and the part about gotta catch them all. I laughed when I was like, wow, they actually think things like this. My gosh. But then again, people, they hear the word polyamory, they don't get into learning about it out of their own idea of the whole monogamy thing. So I'm in favor of non-monogamy, ethical, of course, and I'm also in favor of the anarchy of relationships, because commitment, again, unless they're grown up, they don't know how to commit, because they're gonna be doing their in and out behavior and not actually having authentic, emotional, vulnerable conversations. And a person who is, well, those of us who are with our lovely Claires, it's almost like, okay, we will pick up on that. And so I got used to just people lying, basically. But I know it's not lying. Now I know it's their implicit memory, it's their charge states, it's their adaptive child protecting their child wound. And so, the reality is now everything makes sense. When I was a teenager, and like, why are you doing this? And I don't have an ego. No, it's not me, it's you. I'm like, I'm seeing you doing stuff. Like, I don't, it's not me, but can't prove it, but I can see it. So I learned a lot from my somatics and trauma experts. I'm still learning. And now, like, okay, I got it, because people are oblivious to their own right brain stuff, because it's all implicit memory. They're not paying attention to the body. It is what it is. And that's where, for people like me and anyone who is in fact connected to the energetic sphere, we are very, very, very private, in a sense of don't touch me, it's my body. And it's not because of energy vampires, by the way. It's something that I still don't know how to explain, but we know that when we connect, there's an exchange. And so I'm very much, I'll hug everyone, but it's more like, do I know you? How well do I know what you're doing all of these years? What have you done? Because when you exchange, and Aaron Dowdy actually shows a really great video on that one. For anybody who's a mystic, you should watch that one, because it explains the exchange of energy, which is important to us, because as a Reiki practitioner and just somebody who's always with my crystals and clearing, it's not because of bad or good energy. It's really because of a vibration that we'll pick up on. And more than that, I'm still looking into it from the physics perspective. The other aspects, relationship problems, this one was good because there are people who think that polyamory will solve their problems. No. If you move into secure attachment, that's where you can talk about your emotions, your thoughts, honestly, and are able to care about in-depth sharing. You're going to grow relationships. There aren't problems in relationships. If there's adaptive children, which is what most people are, and here's where there is one part where Jay says how some people are like, oh, it's enlightened to be polyamorous. I laughed with her because I'm like, yeah, it's not about enlightenment or not enlightenment, and I'm not sure if Jay uses the pronoun her, so in case, Jay, you hear this, apologies if you don't. I'm not 100% sure I didn't hear and or ask, but I'll find out. And side note, back to the part about enlightenment, yeah, polyamory is not about you being enlightened or not. And finding that as something to say, as Jay points out, anyone who has any type of common grounded adulthood would be like, yeah, that's BS. Because you're not doing any comparison means you're trying to prove something. So this is the part of where I know that the younger generation is looking to find themselves. I was a teenager too, and I totally would have taken on immediately polyamory because of the way that I love, and because intimate relationships has nothing to do with the body, but has everything to do with me sharing my heart and soul, which is where Rumi's quote comes in, and the 5D mystic in the Enlightenment Soul Age group particularly, we really do not know how love is from separation consciousness. We don't love with the eyes. We love with this. And in fact, this is why nothing a person will ever be able to do will change this. This love is an actual feeling because we're in our ventral vagus nerve, thank you, Stephen Porges, which means we're in a safe body. We're in a restorative, embodied self with an integrated mind that is aware. So we're looking at things with equanimity, not with our own child ego, but our adult or whatever age you are, and then you have the child ego with you because those are charged states that get frozen, and there's other aspects. But let me finish this and then I'll conclude with this example. The part about polyamory is easiest for women than men. Jay's going to do a whole other episode on it. I haven't seen it, but I laughed at this one because if there's anything that I know as a woman is that, no, you're going to get insulted. I mean, I had some dudes say, oh, so if you're polyamorous, that means I can kiss you. It's like, no, that's not what it means, but let me try to keep enlightening you if you want on the topic, but they actually have their own preconceived notions, not to mention their own situation. So I don't think we'll be talking seriously is what I'm saying. If they want to, I'm glad to engage in that type of conversation because I feel it's important for the younger generation particularly to talk about the aspects of a polysecure way, which involves a person though already knowing what it means to be in their secure attachment. So to be a person who can handle your emotional stuff as the grown-up you means you will have eyes on your own adaptive child when you're getting charged, and that means you know if you do have still wounds, if you want to call them that. And Terry Real, I learned this recently from Terry Real and Diane. I was watching one of their free webinars. They have a course on relational something. I forget the website, but if you're interested, reach out. Long story short, as Terry points out, it's not your partner's job to tend to the child. Your job to be aware of your adaptive child that's protecting stuff from your own upbringing and childhood. We all will have had that. And then to talk and use relational language, which is where for the IHP, IG, 5DC community, we have enlightenment, functional adult, love language in the paid subscription-based model content for that reason. So using your own mindset is important. Inner growth is all about you taking whatever comes your way and being able to sit in equanimity, the advanced place of the inner growth program. The free main modules are on the website, but not all of the courses are online yet, only the beginners. However, the third, which is the advanced, leads you to beginning to explore from neutrality your duality, which I can equate to you looking at the karma, likes and dislikes, and doing dharma. I like to think of it as a triangle, but it doesn't have to be. And essentially, when it comes to polyamory, it's a triangle as well, can be, but the lifestyle and mindset of the people who are genuinely polyamorous, because it's how we feel about life. Love is a part of the equation always, because again, we don't love with our eyes, we love with a ventral vagus nerve, a restorative embodied self. So our bodies, as we grow up, feel safe with people because we don't see childish behavior as a threat. So when I meet people, I don't consider that they're lying. As an adult, I grew up to understand that people don't know how to handle themselves. And now that I know about somatics and sensory motor and trauma, I'm like, okay, now I got it. It was always clear to me when people would begin to get defensive that something was off and that I was seeing something, they weren't seeing it, I couldn't prove it. And in fact, to this day, I can't prove it, nor would I want to. Because it's your emotional stuff. If you don't tend to your body, which is your feminine, and your mind, you're choosing only to take a look at it from the left modality and ignoring the other aspect, you're not going to mature the right modality, because the emotions stay in the agitated state, which is, Daniel Siegel, thank you, the embodied, I think he says brain or mind, I always forget, but our head, our brain, or the skull with the neural, all that stuff that happens in our brain actually is connected to our nervous system. So when people, the updated psychoeducation community says emotions, they're not talking about the lovey-dovey feelings. They're actually talking about the energy in motion, which is an input that is going to be emotional, but it's a combination of sensations that arise. And so people hear the word emotions, they think it means something that it doesn't. And again, this is a side note. In the meantime, as we close out this episode, polyamory is about intimate relationships, not only romantic, and it is not in any way, shape, or form about sex or about, again, not committing. In fact, the people who are in it for the reasons of how they lead their relationships are people like Jay. And the Polysecure book is, by the way, a very good book for anybody who's interested, because it will explain to you attachment styles and categories, which is really helpful for people who want to identify what they are potentially and then not stick to the identity, because it's understanding how your brain is inclined to feel. So secure is open and receptive to relationships. Avoidant is instead going to want some disconnect and alone time. And there's ways that a person who wants to move out of that inclination will notice. The ambivalent is where that's about the self not really being there. So they kind of delete themselves and do everything for another, and then they're worried they're going to be left. And so there's preoccupied, and the disorganized, that one is actually even tougher, because there's a fragmented self that almost feels like they're not living things, because they have an inner conflict with their brainstem and their limbic system, which is the attachment wants to attach, because that's our social nature, to attach to each other and seek security and safety and soothe. But the brainstem is saying, no, this is dangerous because the household was terrifying. So they have a fragmented self because there's, yes, go seek proximity. No, it's dangerous, go away. And they will have a secondary attachment style or category. These are two different schools of attachment research, but they both present similar information pieces. And so the secondary modality will be avoidant or ambivalent. For the disorganized attachment, they need to first move to organized before they can then start approaching secure. And this is where it is only if the person's inclined to notice, I want to seek proximity. We all of our bodies actually want to seek social engagement in our ventral vagus nerve. The part that people don't know is a restorative embodied self can do that, which is of one who is in that lovely enlightenment soul age group, or at the very least a secure attachment person with awareness, a functional adult. And that's where the integrated mind comes into the mix as well. But what comes into the mix is a person who realizes that there's a difference for dysregulated and modulated embodied people. They first need an environment that is safe. And when I see the people who are yelling at each other, FYI, that say I promote mental health, but then they cancel and they yell at each other, They don't know what that word means, because if they knew what it meant, I try very hard to ensure that I don't look somebody in the eye if I'm noticing certain things, that I maintain a sense of ease if somebody's really off. Like, I actually will note my environment in an effort to be a safe spot, and to that 5D, by the way, for my people who know about light workers, it's when you're aware that you can bring in an energy that allows a sense of safety to those who around you are not able to stay in a nervous system that is in ease with their surrounding, because they're all too busy judging each other based on societal stuff, like the whole polyamory thing. So when you're truly confident, this is where you can be compassionate at all times, and the rational stuff is something that comes into the mix. I was able to learn more because I do personal development, and that's where I also, with the podcast, we talk about all these things. So the reality is, I care about helping people the way I said I would when I was a kid. I'm still doing it, but also I care about the people around me, and I care about how I can relate to them. And so I get to learn, because that's what education does. We get to learn. Jay does a really great job for anyone who wants to learn about the reality of polyamory. Polysecure is a great book so that you can actually understand about attachment and maybe work on yourself if you feel that there are aspects that you would want to work on. Because again, if you're not yet in a restorative embodied self, you will know that, because here's the example I give. I love to hug people. I don't want to hug a tree. The bark is hard, it's cold. I love to see the nature, but one, I'm a fan of the beach, not of trees necessarily, but of course I know nature we need everything. What I'm trying to say is, if you want to hug a tree and not a human, it's an indication that your body doesn't feel safe with humans, and we are humans. And so you're going against your very nature, because we're all mammalians, and our ventral vagus nerve, our social engagement system, wants to attach. To do it independently and as an adult, that's great. So tune in for more, and have a great day.